All right, let's get started again. So I'm Victor Muller. I'm a utility engineer with the Commission, and I'm going to talk about patrolling and leak survey. So some of the applicable regulations is Part 192 that we've been talking about a lot today, and then the state code General Order 112F. You can find that online. You just Google General Order 112F. It'll be the first result that shows up as a PDF. Has the whole code in there. So 192.721A states that the frequency of patrolling mains must be determined by the severity of the conditions which could cause failure or leakage and the consequent hazards to public safety. So you need to think about your individual systems and what issues you could see happening and use that to inform the frequency of your patrols. Mains in places or on structures where anticipated physical movement or external loading could cause failure or leakage must be patrolled in business districts, which probably doesn't apply to the majority of you, unless you're operating a master meter for some commercial buildings or something of that nature. At intervals not exceeding 4.5 months, but at least 4 times each calendar year, and outside business districts at intervals not exceeding 7.5 months, but at least twice each calendar year. So for most of you, that's going to be a minimum of twice a year with no more than 7.5 months between patrols. So in your records, in order to prove that, you need a date associated with each one of your patrols that you're going to do for compliance with this subpart, so that we as inspectors can verify that you've done the work at an appropriate interval. But any hazardous conditions that you are aware of may necessitate increased frequency, and your O&M manuals may require you to patrol more frequently. I know for mobile home parks, a lot of you do monthly patrols and have that mandated in your O&M because you do your patrols associated with your meter reads. And to go along with that, just going and doing your meter reads and looking at all of your meters is not necessarily a sufficient patrol. You need to make sure that you go to the master meter and you take a look at that. If you have any other above ground piping that in your system, then that should be examined as well. So make sure you're including all the required facilities. Some things you're looking for while you're doing those patrols. Obviously leaks is kind of at the top of your list. So if you smell or hear or see a leak, then you should act on that, make sure you take care of it. Some other indicators, dead vegetation. If you have an underground leak and it comes up, where it comes up through the ground, it can kill whatever greenery you have there. So if all of your park's green and you have this one weird dead spot, you may have a gas leak underneath that. And ants in particular can be attracted to it. My understanding of this is that like rotting carcasses and whatnot give off methane, and so some insects can be attracted to gas leaks because it's the same stuff. Other things to look for, issues with your support. I know a lot of parks use those little metal posts that are kind of flimsy and get kicked around so that they're not actually supporting the meter. You know, just replace those and fix it all up. Excessive load on the meters, corrosion or rust turns a nice color, or especially if you have pitting where parts of your steel are wearing away, then you should correct that. Pull out your wire brush and scrape and paint. Damage to the facilities, coating or wrap. So particularly your pipe to soil interface, right where your pipe comes out of the ground, you should make sure that that's good. And a damaged coating or wrap can actually cause more problems than having no wrap at all. If that's damaged and it's peeling away from the pipe, then water can get in there and then it won't evaporate out. It'll just sit there for longer than it would otherwise. So that needs to be repaired. Excessive vegetation on the facilities. It's kind of the same thing here with the damaged wrap. If you have shrubs or other plants growing against your steel, it can hold moisture for longer than it would otherwise and cause corrosion. So it should be cut back. Use of the gas facilities for electrical grounding, like we discussed earlier. Shorting of the dielectric unions. This also kind of came up with the bicycle leaning against your meter. If you have metal contacting upstream of your union and then downstream of the union, then your cathodic protection is acting on all of that metal. You only want to, and your system is probably only designed to protect your facilities. So from the outlet of PG&E or whatever gas supply you have, all the way to the outlet of the customer meter is all that you want to protect. If you do any more than that, you're often overloading your cathodic protection system, and it will bring down your reads. Just a couple shorts can bring you out of compliance across your entire park. So it's definitely something you want to keep your eye out for. And obstruction of regulator vents. If those vents are blocked, then the regulator may not be able to do its job. Gas, in the event of an overpressure event, gas can actually be pushed out of the regulator through that vent. The regulators on your meters frequently double as gas relief for these systems. So 723A, each operator of a distribution system shall conduct periodic leakage survey in accordance with this section. The type and scope of the leakage control program must be determined by the nature of the operations and the local conditions, but it must meet the following minimum requirements. So these are, again, just like the patrol. For leak survey, these are minimum. You may deem it necessary to perform more frequent leakage surveys if you're noticing problems with your system or believe that there could be future issues. Leakage survey with leak detector equipment must be conducted in business districts at intervals not exceeding 15 months, but at least once each calendar year. And outside of those, once every 5 calendar years at intervals. Yeah. Frequently, that's defined by local jurisdictions, I believe. I don't know that Part 192 has a definition. Are you? Yeah. Okay. Mohammed will take a look at it, and I'll get back to you. But outside, once every 5 business districts, once every 5 years, not to exceed 63 months. However, if your system is not cathodically protected, then that goes to once every 3 years, not to exceed 39 months. General Order 112F has some further requirements. If you are in the vicinity of schools, hospitals, and churches, you have to perform leak surveys annually. I had some discussion with some of my fellow engineers about what in the vicinity means, and it's kind of open to some interpretation, but it sounds like that interpretation is pretty strict. So if your facilities aren't running through a school, a hospital, or church property, or you are immediately adjacent to it, I do not think that this code section applies to you. So for the vast majority of your systems, this will not apply. It would only be, well, I would think that it would be easy to argue that your entire system would then be in the vicinity since you're adjacent to it. If you have a very large system, then yes, it would only be what's nearby. So just to recap, once every 5 years, unless you're not cathodically protected, then once every 3 years, or if you're in a business district or in the vicinity of schools, hospitals, or churches. Also, your O&M manuals, again, may require more frequent surveys. Quite a few of the kind of boilerplate O&M manuals produced by third-party contractors will require annual leak survey, from what I've seen. So reference your O&M to see if that is required for your system. Another thing that was mentioned is that it has to be done with leak survey equipment. You can't just go out and walk around and kind of sniff a little bit and say, yeah, that's my leak survey. You need a device capable of detecting methane gas. A couple examples here, RMLD and DPIR. They have some displays. There's other options on the market, but you need something. And being able to determine the concentration of gas can be important for leak grading. And leak grading is, I'll get to here in a minute. For operator qualifications, the standard courses provided by third-party contractors frequently will not include leak survey as a part of their operator qualifications. So if you want to perform this yourself instead of contracting this out, you will have to be qualified in a manner that is outlined in your O&M. And if no such way to do that is in your O&M, then you will have to edit your O&M to allow that before you perform any leak surveys of your own. So leak grading is required by California state law. So every leak that is discovered has to be assigned a grade between 1 and 3. And a grade 1 leak is the most hazardous, and a grade 3 leak is the least. So a grade 1 leak is a leak that represents an existing or probable hazard and requires immediate repair. You cannot leave this leak on your system. Once it is recognized, it has to be, as a grade 1 leak, it has to be repaired. So there's a list in 143.2A of General Order 112F that goes over some examples of what you should do if you find a grade 1 leak. And they all deal with making the area safe. So evacuate, make sure that after you evacuate, nobody gets back in. Try and do what you can so that no ignition sources are present. And make sure you notify police and fire departments. Some examples of a grade 1 leak. So it's any leak that you judge as the operator of the pipeline to cause an immediate hazard for whatever reason. If a gas is ignited, then that is a grade 1 leak. Any ignition, any indication of gas that is migrated into or under a building or tunnel, because if you have the gas in an enclosed space, then it's easier to have a concentration of gas that is ignitable. And any reading at the outside wall of the building or where the gas could potentially migrate to the outside wall of a building, because that's an indication that you may have gas elsewhere nearby. Any reading of 80% of the gas lower explosive limit, this is part of why having, being able to determine the concentration of gas with your leak survey equipment is important, because otherwise some of these leaks may not be gradable. Any reading of 80% of LEL or greater in small structures not associated with gas facilities where gas could potentially migrate to the outside wall of the building, or any leak that could be seen, heard, or felt, and which is in a location that may endanger the general public or property. So moving on to grade 2 leaks. It's a leak that is not hazardous at this time, but could easily or probably become hazardous. These must be repaired within 15 months from the date the leak is reported. And it has to be, unless it's a segment of pipeline that is under consideration for replacement. So if you, before this leak occurred, you were going to replace the piece of pipe, then you get an extra 6 months on top of that 15 months to do that replacement. And you have to determine the repair priority and consider the amount of migration of gas, proximity to buildings and other structures, extent of pavement, and soil type and conditions. Each grade 2 leak must be reevaluated every 6 months. So if you have a grade 2 leak on your system, you can't just leave it there for 15 months and then go out and repair it. You have to go out with your leak survey equipment and take a look at that grade 2 leak every 6 months to verify that it is still a grade 2 leak. It hasn't become a grade 1 leak. Grade 2 leaks vary greatly in degree of potential hazard. Some grade 2 leaks, when evaluated by the criteria, require prompt scheduled repair within the next 5 working days. So if it's a grade 2 leak but could very easily become hazardous, then you may be required to accelerate your repair schedule. And just some more information here on that probability, conditions that may cause a grade 2 leak to require more immediate repair. Some examples, any reading of 40% LEL or greater under a sidewalk in a wall-to-wall paved area that does not qualify as a grade 1 leak and where gas could potentially migrate to the outside wall of the building. Any reading of 100% LEL or greater under a street in a wall-to-wall paved area with potential for migration. Any reading less than 80% LEL in small substructures not associated with gas facilities and where gas could potentially migrate, creating a probable future hazard. Part 5 here probably doesn't apply to most of you unless you have, never mind. That would. Class location is a sort of measurement of the population density around your facilities. That's outlined elsewhere in Part 192. Class 3 or 4 would be a pretty high density area. So if your mobile home park is downtown or in other locations where people are likely to be, then you would be in a Class 3 location. And then any leak that in the judgment of the operator personnel at the scene is of sufficient magnitude to justify a scheduled repair. So if, in your opinion, the leak is severe enough that you would want it repaired soon, then you can classify it as a grade 2 leak. Grade 3 leaks are not hazardous and are not expected to become hazardous. They must be reevaluated during the next scheduled survey, whenever that would be, or every calendar year not to exceed 15 months. So if your next scheduled repair is, or leak survey is 5 years out, you still have to examine your grade 3 leaks once every year until you've repaired them. Or it no longer needs repair due to you not getting readings off of that location. So some examples, reads of less than 80% LEL in small gas substructures, such as meter boxes or gas valve boxes, any reading under a street in areas without wall-to-wall paving, where it is unlikely to migrate anywhere dangerous. And so you can regrade your leaks. If you say you have a grade 3 leak and you come back a year later to do your recheck and you find that it's escalated to a grade 2, that can be done, and it can be, and then you come back 6 months later, you have your grade 2 leak, and it's a grade 3 leak again. Well, you can move it back down to a grade 3 leak, but you can only do that once. So after a leak has been downgraded to grade 3, the leak must be evaluated every calendar year not to exceed 15 months. If the grade 3 leak is upgraded any time to a higher grade, then it must be reevaluated and repaired for the higher grade to which the leak is upgraded and may not be downgraded again to grade 3. So you can only downgrade each individual leak to grade 3 one time. So, quick review. Grade 1 leak is existing and probable threat to life or property. And you have to address it immediately. You can't carry this leak on your system for any period of time. It has to be repaired or rectified immediately. Grade 2 leaks, they pose potential future threats, but not an immediate threat. Has to be repaired within 15 months, rechecked every 6 months. But depending upon your judgment, you may need to repair it sooner. And grade 3 leaks are any leaks that are not hazardous and will not become hazardous, and you have to recheck it once annually to ensure that it is maintained its grade 3 status. All right, are there any questions? Yeah. Yeah. It's in 192. Do you know what section? Yeah. Class locations are defined in 192.5. sir. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. 5 to 15% is your explosive range. So when it refers to 80% LEL, that's 80% of 5% gas and air. So it's 4%. Propane has a broader range. Yeah, I'd have to look that up. That sounds right, but I'll verify and get back to you. Yeah. Do you have a question? So abandoned means a very specific thing under Part 192. There's really only two statuses that a gas line can take. One is active and the other is abandoned. So in an abandoned facility, there's requirements in 192 as to what that entails. And abandoned facilities are blown down. They should not contain any gas. So if your facility still has natural gas in it, you're still required to do all of the maintenance tasks required by Part 192 on that facility. So your patrol, leak survey, cathodic protection, all of that has to be done until the facilities are removed from their source of gas and blown down and abandoned, capped off. Okay.